So first up, I want to talk to you guys about our weekly schedule. Yeah, about what's going on this week. So you guys are prepared for everything that's going to happen. But before we do that, I should take attendance, because that's expected and all. So everybody's here, yeah? Anybody absent?
Nope.
I don't think so.
Maybe.
Maybe not okay, so if you guys have checked the photo by now, you'll have seen that you guys have the first test on Friday.
But over what?
Over what? Everything that we covered for this chapter. Now, to go over and kind of explain this a little more, I thought we would take the time and explain everything, kind of what it means. So, if we come over here to Geography Period 8, it will maybe help us. Yep, we are analyzing that in sociology. Part of sociology is film study. So we're actually looking into what's called the hero's journey, which is part of a greater work done in the 1930s by a guy where it basically talks about like the foundation of symbolism. Anyway, so your test, which is on Friday, will consist of 3 parts. The first part is the math. That's questions 1 through 15. Now, by now you guys should have all had a chance to print out a map and start working on that. If you haven't, then you're going to want to start getting it out. Now, yes, you need to label the entire map, the entire U.S. and Canada.
Wait, label that means like numbers? Or?
Yeah, so what I want you to do, 62, 63, something like that. And basically, let me see. I think you did it perfectly. Yep, you absolutely did it right. So you see the way she's done it is on the back she has all the numbers, and then on the front she has the numbers labeling each of the things. That's exactly how I want you to do this.
Is there a map in our book that has it?
Yes, absolutely. So that's what you need to do. Now I will give you 1 point for every ID you have, so that map is worth 63 points. Right? Now, for the actual test, though, you only have to know the 15 I gave you. And those 15 are right here. It says map IDs on the test. And you'll see on the left-hand side, I have the ID. And on the right-hand side, I have the numbers that are associated with it. So the way this is going to be filled out, you guys are going to have a scanned font sheet. Like we probably had in other classes before. It's gray can, so it's in the bubble sheet. And what I want you to do is you'll have a map listed 1 through 15. Just like how you're putting the numbers on there, I'm putting numbers on there. And you need to tell me what number 1 is, what number 2 is, etc., by bubbling in the corresponding things. Now, you will not use any of these more than once. It's only 15. I'm not tricking you. You're all right there. So, for instance, you'll need to know where Ontario is. So, for instance, let's say that question number 5 is Ontario. Where is Ontario? So you'll go there, you'll find the little number that correlates there, and you'll bubble in A. Does that make sense?
Wait. Never mind.
Okay. So that's 1 through 15. 16 through 30 is multiple choice. Now, I have actually attached a study guide right here. And if you open that up, you'll see a thing that says things to know. So, for instance, one of the questions, or one of the things you need to know is about the effects of movement. Well, clearly we haven't discussed that yet, but we're doing that tomorrow, right? And some of the things have to do with culture. Some of the things have to do with physical geography. In essence, for each of the terms I've given you, you should be able to identify. Thank you for the card, by the way. Ms. Simpson. Okay, I have 3 people raising their fingers right now. Who?
Me.
Okay, good. I'm just confused. I'm like, you had a finger, I'm just like, don't do that to me.
I didn't have my finger up.
Yeah. Anywho. So, back to it. You're going to have 15 multiple choice questions taken from that, and what I would do is you should be able to identify, explain, and provide an example for all things I've given you. Now, not everything has come up yet. That's okay. We'll finish by basically Wednesday. And then you'll have everything you need to know. Now, the rest of the test is actually an essay. You only have to write 1 essay, okay? there are 2 possible essays on the study guide. Both of them will be options when you take the test. So you really only need to prepare one of them. One of the essays is kind of explain the difference between the U.S. and Canada, what's similar, what's different, compare and contrast, that sort of thing. The second is explain changes that have occurred in North America over the past 10 years. So we'll kind of be looking at all of those things. Now, you had a question just a second ago.
Yeah, where's Hawaii on this map?
It is,
That's not Hawaii.
no, that's Alaska.
Oh, right. So where's Hawaii?
It's in the Pacific Ocean.
It's basically somewhere
Yeah.
over here.
Mhm.
Or here.
Yeah. Basically, yeah, you would mark it kind of to the side.
You don't know.
Okay, so back to it again.
Sorry.
That's fine. Back to the original question. The essay is worth 20 points. So that's a total of 50 for the test. So here's my recommendation to you. If you find yourself crunched for time and you can't do both the math and prepare for the test, prepare for the test. Because you have to take that Friday no matter what. If you don't turn in your math on Friday, you can turn it in later and it doesn't hurt you one way or the other. The only thing you have to remember is to do it. And I'll be giving you another map next week. So, just kind of keep adding up. But if you can do both, then that's fine. Now, for the rest of the week, here's kind of what we're doing. Tomorrow we're covering the theme of movements, as well as what we don't get to region today. And then on Wednesday, you need to bring your textbooks to class. Wednesday. We're doing a case study. So you guys will be reading something from the textbook and kind of discussing this kind of thing. So that's what we're doing on Wednesday, all right? Then we should be done with everything in North America. That means Thursday is a review day, and Friday we take the test. What we're going to do on a review day, I'm going to give you guys some time to study as a group. I'm going to give you time to study with each other, and my printer is freaking out with what's going on.
Yeah, I noticed that a couple
Please
minutes
turn
ago.
it off and then on. You got it, lady. Thank you. Anyways, the other thing we're going to do on Thursday is called Post-it Note Review. It's a review game I like to play where I bring up old tests from previous years. Now, there's a lot of similarities. Some of the questions are going to be the same, some are not. But ultimately, that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to ask you guys questions from previous tests I've given, and basically it goes, I'll ask the question. If you think you know the answer, raise your hand. If I call on you and you answer it right, you get a dart. You will then proceed to throw this dart at the dartboard. And if you get somewhere, say like right here, you get a certain number of points to put on a Post-it note that you get to stick onto your test, and then we'll just add on.
Oh my God!
The number of points you get per dart is determined by the multiplier of darts. So for instance, this ring and this ring, basically the non-colored ones, are 1 point. The outer ring is 2, the inner ring is 3. A single bullseye is 4, and the double bullseye is 5.
Oh my
I will give you however many points you land with darts. Now, I will say this. If you already have a point, or if you've gotten a lot of questions right but you haven't necessarily gotten points, I will start to give other people chances in front of you, even if they raise their hand after you, to help spread the Post-it notes around. That being said, the record I ever had anybody was scoring 16 bonus points on one test. So they had a 66 out of 50. Because that's what I 50 out of 50, because we have probably maybe that. Yes, ma'am.
It's not this map.
Okay, now's not the time to ask me about the map. Okay, just hold off on that. Now, so for instance, that would be plus 3 points, right? You have to bring them to the test in order for you to get the points. If you leave them at home or forget them, they become nothing. So don't lose them, okay?
Okay.
Now then, that pretty much covers everything with the test. You had a question about the map, you said.
I don't know my label is right.
Okay, well, if you want to come and ask me later, like, have me actually look at it, I'll do that.
Like, how
But you
many-
guys should not be working on the map right now, because we're right about to get started on notes, so you need to shift gears and do this instead.
But how many actually numbers will we?
63, I believe.
Okay.
What is-
I believe. You have to
what
double
does the
check.
map do?
The map is due Friday. Yes. Well, but you said you forgot Hawaii, right? Because you put Hawaii where Alaska was.
No, that's where I put Alaska. I put Hawaii on.
Okay, so you need Hawaii. Yeah, so that would be 63.
Wait, do I have to draw Hawaii on?
Just put an arrow. That's fine. It's in the Pacific Ocean, so just down. You know? That's fine. All right, so let's go ahead and finish up location, place, and get started on region. So this is about where we left off. I told you guys that we needed to know some of the climates for all these different areas. For instance, do you guys know what is the most common climate in North America? Well, let me rephrase that. Most common climate in the United States.
Warm. No.
That's not a climate region.
Wait. Temperate.
That would be correct. Also, humid continental. It's temperate zone. Humid continental is the most common by far. Humid subtropical is only really common in the south. Yeah. There's also Mediterranean in California, by the way. Now, as far as Canada is concerned, the most common is humid continental. Now, that being said, another very, very common one is coniferous forests, right? A large portion of Canada is covered in coniferous trees. So just make a note of that. As far as individual regions, you've got the plains, which are the grasslands areas, highlands, the Pacific West Coast, and the mountains in the west. As far as the northern part of Canada, it's mostly Arctic and subarctic, and otherwise kind of generalized. So again, most common is temperate. You're going to find mostly humid continental. This map shows that more or less, as well as the different areas you see farther north. But just to give you an idea of some of these different climates that we have, you know, if you actually break things down, my goodness, my phone will not stop ringing. Is this important, or are you just whining to me? Yeah. So sometimes it's just complaints. Anyways, but to give you an idea, once again, kind of what we're talking about, as far as highlands is concerned, one thing that's interesting about the sort of physical landscape of the United States is it's pretty varied. We're thinking the Everglades, the deserts of Arizona, the freaking Rocky Mountains, right? Which is debatably one of the longest mountain chains in the world because it's connected through the Sierra Madres into the Andes. So some geographers would say, well, that's really one mountain chain. But regardless, it's all due to tectonic activity along the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is the most tectonic activity of anywhere in the world. That's the city of Vancouver. It's actually a pretty neat city because it's like kind of a horseshoe shape around the bay. But it actually has a lot of different areas throughout what we consider like Alaska. So for instance, this is an area of tundra you would see. And what's interesting, you have these kind of glacial process creating these gashes in the land which create waterways and these things called fjords, which are, you know, kind of channels throughout the land. They're technically V-shaped narrow inlets. Anyways, I have another slide that says like for further reading, but I know you won't do that, so let's move on. Well, I mean, it's like one of those things I was like, you know, hey, if you need to know more about climate, but it's like that's got to be the most boring thing in the world to read. So yeah, we're just going to skip that and go right into the concept of region. So to start off, we're talking about cultural. What is going on? My computer is having a conniption fit. You need a Snickers, dude. You're not you when you have this. What is going on? I apologize if you guys watch this video later. You're like, it's all like giving you the spins. You're throwing up. It's gross.
Are we putting this in the same note?
No, this is a new section. This is region, themed region. So we're dealing with cultural similarities now. So basically, all that stuff we talked about, similarities and differences between the U.S. and Canada. So first and foremost, let's talk about similarities.
Wait,
Number one,
that last section?
that was place. Remember, location is where it is. Place is describing the physical geography. Region is cultural similarities. So now we're moving on to culture.
Did we do location?
Yes.
Wait, I thought we were doing region.
Location was first.
Region is the United States and Canada.
Okay, everyone stop talking and listen. The very first section we did was location, right? And I actually told you we combined location and place into one slideshow. So we just finished location and place. Now we are starting region. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Because I was like, I know I can solve this problem. You guys just go listen. All right. So back to the similarities. What's similar between us and Canada? Well, first and foremost, the language. We already said this, but let's say it again. Mostly everyone speaks English. Now that being said, they do speak French as a second language in Canada, but for the most part, that's pretty much centered around the area of Quebec, or French Canada. Historically, this area is known as Anglo-America. Have you guys ever known the Angles, you know who those are? Like Angles and the Saxons? Anglo-Saxons? Where were they, the Angles and the Saxons?
Quebec.
You're not wrong, it's in Europe. England specifically. English comes from Angle. Anglish. So we're talking about the English-speaking people. That's why it's Anglo-America. Now, initially, this area was settled by a variety of different European groups. You had the French, you had the Dutch, you had the English, and you had the Spanish. The English, however, very quickly started kind of pushing everybody else out. This was largely due to their hunger for land. They wanted land more so than anything else. And so initially they kicked out the Dutch, and then they kicked out the French. They did this during the French and the Indian War. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting. The English wanted land. Do you guys know what the French wanted? What did they want? They wanted fur. Good. So what they wanted was fur. They formed good relationships with the natives. So that is why a lot of the natives sided with the French. They didn't all. Some sided with the English. But a lot of them did. And so that's why we call it the French and Indian War, because it's from our perspective. Because the thing is, we fought it. You know, we were the English colonists. And for a lot of people, they were kind of content to remain English subjects until the issue came up, who was going to pay for the war? Because wars are expensive. You have to pay soldiers, you have to buy equipment, all this stuff. So two kind of schools of thought came about in Parliament. One, that everybody in the English colonies and everywhere should have to pay more taxes, which saying you're going to raise taxes as a politician is about as popular as killing children on national television.
Oh my, wait.
To say not at all. No one wants to pay more taxes. No one's like, yeah, I would love to give the government more money. That just sounds like fun. You know, nobody wants to do that, even though sometimes it benefits us, right? So ultimately, that was a really unpopular policy. So instead, they said, well, let's just make the colonists pay for it, right? They're the ones who benefited because they're the ones who are getting all this extra land, so they should just pay more taxes. And of course, that was terribly unpopular back in the colonies, who felt it was unfair they should have to pay more taxes when they don't even have people representing them in Parliament. Hence the age-old adage, no taxation without representation. Yeah, you guys learned that in grade school, right? Now, let me explain. It is way more complex than that. There's a lot more reasons for why the revolution happened, but a big part of it was the French and Indian War, right? So the 7 Years' War, which is also the French and Indian War, resulted in England dominating North America, but also in the Revolution. Now, once the Revolution happened, we know how that story goes. But one thing to consider, do you guys know what happened to all the loyalists, all the colonists who sided with England after the Revolutionary War?
Did they die?
They went to Canada. Because Canada was not part of these colonies. They were their own thing. So they were welcoming these loyal British subjects with open arms. Right? So they go up to Canada, and meanwhile, the United States is eyeing Canada to be like, you know, you guys should be part of America. Everyone should be part of America. This idea called manifest destiny. We're going to spread from sea to shining sea. Right? So we're going to do this. In addition, we were busy killing natives like crazy. So the natives had their own powerful nation over to the side, and there was one dude named Tecumseh who was trying to unify all the tribes together so that they could fight against the Americans and basically kick them out, right? And the British were like, you should totally, that's an awesome idea. Because they were thinking, if you weaken America, we can reconquer America, right? We want to add the colonies back. So basically, they're egging the natives on by providing weapons and training and all this kind of stuff. And that, of course, pissed the Americans off something fierce. So what happens is another war. You see, there was this dude named Napoleon who was over in Europe who was busy basically conquering all of it. So England was busy with him. Meanwhile, they really desperately needed sailors, right? accomplished seamen who could run their ships and fight. So basically, they began forcibly impressing sailors, which is essentially slavery, into the British Navy, and this pissed us off quite mightily. So we issued an ultimatum. We said, if you don't stop sacking our ships and taking our sailors and all this stuff, we will fight you, come at me, bro. Well, here's the thing, is England really didn't want another war with America. Right? First of all, they couldn't handle two wars. You know, we were actually kind of on good terms with Napoleon, so that was not something they wanted part of. But we also really see us as a threat because, you know, there's an ocean between us. So in order to mollify us, they basically said, sure, we'll stop getting your sailors and putting them on our ships, no big deal. So they send the diplomat who arrives like a day after we were like, war! And we declared war on them. So he just scared England too.
Oh my God.
So basically, we're throwing down. Yeah.
How would they message to each other?
Instant messenger, duh.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. No, letters. And sending people, right?
Don't that take like 6 months to get back and forth?
Yeah, well, 3, but yes. 6 months back and forth, which meant things tended to be behind schedule, which is why, fun story, when the war ended, Andrew Jackson didn't know. Well, it took days later. He like, the war was over, but he conquered New Orleans anyways. Andrew Jackson was a jerk. With a capital. Well, he sort of mass murdered natives after the fact.
Yeah.
Is he the one on the $20 bill?
Mm.
Aren't they replacing him?
Are they still? I think so. Yeah. To be fair, he was a rapist and a murderer. Probably shouldn't have been on the dollar. Yes, everyone was. But that's an overstatement. But anyway. Well, not so much Washington. Yeah, we'll get to that. Anyways, no, he totally was. But we're getting off track here. Back to the War of 1812. Do you guys know when the War of 1812 starts?
1812.
1811.
Yeah.
It begins on November 7th, 1811, the Battle of Tippecanoe. Basically, here's what goes down. A group of natives are meeting at the town of Prophetstown. It's named after the brother of Tecumseh, whose name I cannot even begin to pronounce. But everyone called him Prophet because he was a holy man. So basically, they're there and they're bringing up arms. They're quite mad at the Americans. So William Henry Harrison, who eventually became president, got together an army just to give them more forward, kind of said, guys, you need to stop raising weapons, and basically warned everybody that if this is going to go down, it's going to go down. So at first, Tecumseh's like, dude, do not fight them. I'm going to go get some bros, we're going to surround them, then we're going to slaughter them, so just chill. So he runs off to go get more help, basically. But his brother was kind of hot-headed, and he's like, dude, we already outnumber them like 10-1, no bigs. So he attacks them in the middle of the night, except things go wrong. It is a gruesome battle, the Battle of Tippecanoe, and ultimately there are higher casualties at Tippecanoe than pretty much any other battle in North America up to that point, like percentage-wise. It's bad, but the natives lose and end up running away. In response, Harrison's army chilled for a little bit to make certain they weren't going to attack him, and then burned Prophetstown to the ground. They then dug up all of the graves of natives around the area and then desecrated the corpses. When the natives came, yeah. No. That just cut them up, hung them up, burned them, that sort of thing.
No, in one of the trips where they were going through the.
Oh, you mean cannibalism? Yeah, that did happen, but that's again getting off tangents, right? So the point is that things were pretty bad, but that pretty much shattered the illusion that war was not going to break out. So in essence, we have 3 different groups fighting this war. Now, we'll get to them in just a second. First of all, this shows Canada, basically how it was broken up between the French and the English. Most of it was French, but the territory, or most of it was English, excuse me, but the territories the French had, pretty useful along the St. Lawrence River. All right, so we have 3 sides to the War of 1812, each having different objectives. That's military talk for things we want to accomplish. Number 1, the British. Number 1, they wanted to do was keep Canada from being invaded by England, or by the United States. We had every intention of liberating Canada, because we made the mistake of thinking that all Canadians wanted freedom, right? They wanted to be free of the oppressive yoke of the British, except remember all those loyalists? They're Canadians. So they absolutely wanted nothing to do with the United States. Secondly, they wanted to reassert control over the colonies. The U.S. we wanted, of course, to invade Canada, liberate, invade, and also to stop the British from attacking American ships. Lastly, they wanted to stop the British from meddling in North America, stop them from inciting the natives, stop them from attacking their shipping, that sort of thing. Lastly, the natives. They wanted to unify and to drive out the Americans. So, how do you determine who wins a war?
Comes out with the most, what the
Whoever
doesn't
doesn't
die
Whoever achieves most of their objectives. Well,
Yeah.
here's the thing is, if you guys think about it, most of the time I think we start with the belief that, whoever wins the war is whoever, doesn't everybody die. The thing is, casualties aren't really that high in war most of the time. The real objective you have in war is to make the other person surrender first. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that. But ultimately, it's about who achieves their objectives. So if you were to ask me who wins the War of 1812, I'll tell you nobody does. There is no winner. It's called the Forgotten War for a reason. Actually, in truth, the War of 1812 and the Korean War are both called the Forgotten War, but still. It's one of those things we don't tend to talk about very much because it's really not very clear-cut and kind of not really sure what happened. But I think that's unsatisfying, so we're gonna figure out who's the winner here. So we're gonna see who achieves their objectives. Number one, did Britain keep Canada from being invaded by the United States? Yes, they did. Obviously, because Canada isn't part of the U.S. Now, I will say this. We actually did conquer parts of Canada. But by that same token, they also conquered parts of North America, like Boston. They also burned the White House to the ground.
We had a White House back then.
Yes. And it was burned.
Oh, it was in
Now, so that's one they did. Did they reassert control of the lost colonies? No, because we're not England. So that's 1 out of 2, ain't bad. U.S. Did we stop the British attacks on American ships? Yes, we did. However, that technically happened before the war. So I don't know if we get credit for that one. So we'll give it kind of a meh. We'll give it a pass. Did we liberate Canada? No, obviously not. Did we stop the British meddling in America? Yes, we did. After this point, Britain basically saw it wasn't worth the expense. It wasn't worth the effort. In fact, the President Monroe, even went so far as to say, England, if you try to come here again, we're going to smack you down so hard. It was like flexing at him. But England's like, whatever, bro, we don't care. And basically nobody really feared the United States until like Teddy Roosevelt was like, we're going to conquer everything. Like, oh my God, these guys are crazy. By that point, stuff actually, like we actually had a powerful Navy. It's like, we should not antagonize these guys. Roll into World War I, things kind of change. But that's 100 years from now. So moving on. So no, we did not liberate Canada, but we did succeed in keeping them out of North America from that point on. So we give us a 1. 1 out of 3, maybe 1.5, something like that. Native tribes. Did they liberate the lands? Lost the Americas? Absolutely not. Did they unify? Once again, no. After Tippecanoe, it became very hard for Tecumseh to actually unify the tribes, and it basically the dream ended at his death at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. So long story short, if we have any winners, it's the U.S. and Great Britain, with the only loser being the Native Americans. Because basically from that point on, it begins a slow and steady genocide of Native peoples.
Did we
Capital
basically
G.
kill over half of the native tribes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the numbers are way, 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 way down. To put it like Andrew Jackson, for instance. Okay, one of the very first things I'll say with history, we don't judge. It's not our place to judge people from previous times because that's not fair. It's not fair for us to look back at the behaviors of other people who were doing things within the moral spectrum of their time and say, well, that was wrong for them to do that. It was what it was. Our place as historians to say this is what happened. But I will say this. Andrew Jackson was a terrible person. That being said, we can maybe also kind of understand where he was coming from. To some degree. Basically, his experience growing up was one where natives were the scary boogeymen who would capture people and slaughter whole families, women and children, and everything. So, kind of growing up with that, it's maybe understandable, kind of a little bit of what he was doing. There was a couple people like that, in fact. John Tipton's another one. His father and family were killed by natives. And then when he joined the army, he was at Tippecanoe, where his surrogate father figure, Spear Spencer, was cut down. the relationship, I'll put it this way, was not good between natives and non-native peoples at this point. That's why we try to learn from our mistakes and learn from history. That being said, though, it was kind of interesting to see Jackson, how basically he went about going through the Trail of Tears despite it being illegal. It's pretty terrible when you read about the history of the time. But I digress. The point is, the War of 1812 influences us in later years as we start kind of being a geopolitical entity, as well as engaging in empire, But also something we have in common with history, with Canada. This map shows sort of the claims before the Revolution, before the War of 1812, before the French and Indian War, as they kind of changed places and hands and things like that. Long story short, though, I'll say this. It's funny to me because I'll frequently talk to people about what do you know about Canada. It's how they're such a lovely people. They never get in arguments with anybody. They never fought a war. Yes, they did. In fact, they were in World War I before we were, and we had a lot of Americans join the Canadian Army so they could fight. Yeah. So there's all kinds of things about history you don't know until you do some digging, and then things get kind of interesting.
You can join without being a citizen?
That's called being part of a foreign legion. In fact, if you look in the, like whenever you get a passport, there's a list of things you can't do. And one of the things, if you join a foreign nation's army, you actually revoke your citizenship to the United States. So, yeah, that's the thing that happens. So, for instance, there was actually a unit in World War I that was a fighter unit, or pilots, called the Lafayette Escadrille, where Americans would join the French army and fight in World War I, despite America not technically being in the war. So that did happen. Now, this is a kind of a neat little picture. This is actually from the largest War of 1812 reenactments in North America. It's called the Battle of Mississinewa. This image.
Oh, that's yellow. It's so bright.
Yeah, I'm loading it. It'll take a minute. There we go. Let's bring it over. Let me shrink this guy real quick. Show you the picture. Oh, for goodness sakes. Oh, it's like extended view now. There we go. Shows the battle reenactment in progress and gives kind of a, oh, for God's sakes. I just need to change this out real quick. 1 second. Nah, I'm just going to do duplicate instead of the other. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Shows the kind of some of what's going on, kind of how fighting would go. So let's kind of give you a rundown of what we're looking at here. First off, you'll see some pretty colorful green and yellow guys towards the front. That is a type of soldier called a rifleman. They use special weapons called rifles, which are guns that have rifling in them. If you don't know what that means, if you've ever looked inside of the barrel of a gun, you'll see that they've got grooves cut into them. What happens is when the bullet ignites, those grooves cause the bullet to rotate and spiral. That causes it to go a longer distance and make it more accurate. You don't have it go off track as much. Yep.
But didn't the British already have that, and then the U.S. were behind, and they got it eventually?
Well, no, everybody used them. The problem with rifles is, one, getting good with a rifle takes a lot of time. For instance, trained riflemen could fire like this with no propping, nothing like that. I forget the exact term for shooting like that. But they could fire at an aim target 200 yards away, which is a tremendous shot. That is super hard if you don't know what that's like.
So would that be from there to
Well, it's a third of a football field. Well, actually, no, it's more than that, because it's a third of a football field, that's right.
So from there to wall?
I don't know the exact range. I'd have to break out my rangeometer, which I do have one. But needless to say, it's hard. It's really hard. And on top of that, riflemen are slow. Not like physically slow, they're slow to reload because all that rifling grabs your bullet when you're trying to reload it. So you're not going to be getting a lot of rate of fire. So what you do is you get your riflemen, small numbers of really good shots, and you basically stick them on drummers, fifers, and any officer they can find.
Why are we taking on drummers?
The reason is, imagine you have a field of 1,000 guys, and you want them all to do the exact same thing at the same time. Now, what's kind of neat is human beings are actually really good at syncing in on a rhythm. For instance, if I just started snapping, had you guys clap along, you would have the exact rhythm within about 3 seconds, and it would be off by less than a 1,000th of a second. They actually tested this with a football stadium filled with people to see if they could get it accurate, and yes, they can. So we respond very well to sound cues. Now, here's the thing, is you see all this smoke? It makes it really hard to see anybody. And if you're trying to shout, it's so loud, you can't hear the guy standing next to you. So what you do is you get a musician, usually a fifer and a drummer, to coordinate sounds that they can hear. The commanding officer will say something like prime and load, and then the drummer will drum a beat that everyone can hear. It says that means prime and load. The sound for that is, by the way, oh man, I have read. First and foremost, I'm a reenactor. And for about 6 years, I was the captain of the 5th Regiment of Volunteer Mounted Rifles. It's a unit. It's one of these rifleman units, so I know all the things. Actually, I don't know all the things. I know a lot of the things. The colonel, who I was underneath all of the things. But regardless, this is one of the types of units you have. Far larger is these guys, the infantry, right? They're using muskets. These are smoothbore weapons that you can reload in quick succession. In fact, to get everybody to do it the exact same way, like say not have accident, people banging into each other and stuff like that, they would practice a book of maneuvers called the drill. And they'd be taught by drill instructors, usually of the rank of sergeant. Yeah, you get the idea. That's where that comes from. That's why we still use that in our military today. It was efficiency. But by shooting the drummer, now they can't signal what's going on. You send the whole unit into chaos, right? So ultimately, it's a combination of different forces. Now, you also see these guys who are bestly dressed in plainclothes. Those are called militiamen. They are your everyday Joe who also happens to pick up a gun. Now, depending on who you are in the military, you might run at a certain number of casualties. For instance, if your unit took 20% casualties, right, something to the effect of 1/5 of everybody dies, you're going to run away, regardless of who you are. Militia would run at 15, so not much farther than that. Below them, you have your regular infantry who could go 10 or 15%. Basically, flip that. They would the regular infantry would be 15%, and then the other ones. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, militiamen were really untrustworthy. You didn't want them as the main part of your army. Yeah.
What would happen if your drummer got shot?
Basically, you have chaos and hope someone else can drum. That's also why multiple companies had multiple drummers in case something like that could happen. It was also considered really skeezy and unhonorable that everybody did it. The belief for a long time in American history has been that militiamen and rifles, that's what carried America to victory. Is that they would have guys hiding behind trees and the British would win it. Totally wrong. Absolutely false. The American infantry was incredibly important to the revolutionary tactics. In fact, they were preferable in every way. But trained riflemen were a godsend because you could do all kinds of sneaky things with, such as harrowing enemy trips and things like that. But needless to say, the conflict was one that dramatically influenced our politics. Basically after the War of 1812, America sort of becomes isolationist. Basically, we're not really trying to interfere with anybody else. At the same time, we're starting to expand and get bigger and bigger. So like England, you've got them expanding the colonies and dealing with all these problems. America didn't do that till way late because we didn't need to. In addition, it kind of changes the way we interact with the other European nations. Getting off the tangent there as well. All right, we're going to call that a day because we have 3 minutes. I'll stop the recording, and you guys can just kind of marinate for a minute or two.